I believe in a world where borders no longer define who we are, where people feel at home anywhere, regardless of the language they speak or where they come from, where our native culture is not a limitation, but a unique strength that empowers us to pursue opportunities without boundaries. I'm Alex, founder of Effectiff, one of the leading multilingual communication companies in the United States. And at Effectiff, our mission is simple. We help people connect, belong, and be heard across languages and cultures. By supporting international businesses and helping federal and local institutions deliver essential human rights, whether at medical appointments, school meetings, or in court, all in the client's native language, we are building a more inclusive and equitable society. Today, the way we live and work is more global, mobile, and diverse than ever before. But true inclusion only happens when we truly understand one another. That's when language becomes more than a tool for communication. It becomes a bridge for connection. At Effectiff, we don't just break barriers. We build trust between people, institutions, and cultures. Our team speaks with one voice, united not by geography, but by shared purpose. When borders fade, human connection grows. Every conversation brings us closer. This is a step toward a world without borders, where language unites and no one is left behind. Effectiff, breaking language barriers, building a future without borders.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are having a special event today with Michael Mule from former Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights Director, and we're going to get started very soon. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to join. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. We're so happy to be here. We're glad that you came. Just give us a few moments. We're going to wait for a few additional people to join. Mike, it looks like you've got a lot of fans in the comment section. Love to see that.
Yeah, it's great to see a lot of familiar names here in the comment section.
Perfect. Thank you, interpreter. Yep, can see your hands very clearly now. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Super excited to chat with you today. and welcome to Justice Doesn't Speak One Language. My name is Liz, and I'm delighted that you could join us for what promises to be a rich and important conversation. We've gathered here to explore a critical issue: how language access and multilingual communication shapes the very meaning of justice in diverse communities. In many systems, legal, civic, health, education, the language someone speaks should never determine whether they are heard, whether they understand, or whether they are able to fully participate. Yet all too often, language becomes a barrier to fairness, to engagement, and to belonging. Over the course of our session, we'll hear from Mike Mulé, former Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights Director and 2025 National Council on Interpreting in Healthcare Language Access Champion Award winner. Mike has been working at the intersection of language and justice and is a powerful voice in uncertain time. We'll consider questions such as how can institutions move beyond English only defaults? What are the gaps between policy and practice? And how do we create spaces where speaking your own language is not a hindrance, but an asset? I'm honored to have Mike here to share his extensive experience in language access at the federal level. He'll share reflections, best practices, and real-world stories that illustrate both the challenges and the possibilities when justice meets language and diversity. Mike, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Liz. First, thanks for having me today. I do appreciate the conversation and the opportunity to talk to people about these important issues. As Liz mentioned, I'm a former U.S. Department of Justice employee. Most recently, I was the Principal Deputy Director for the Office for Civil Rights in the Office of Justice Programs at DOJ, where I worked on a lot of civil rights enforcement issues. But prior to that, for 13 years, I worked in the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. So for 15 years, I worked on Title VI and similar civil rights laws, the enforcement of those laws, and language access issues at the Department of Justice. During that time, I was, like I said, a Principal Deputy Director in Office for Civil Rights, and in the Civil Rights Division, I was a senior attorney. And at the Civil Rights Division, I got to work on the state court language access team. And a site that many of you are familiar with, I got to administer and help redesign, was lep.gov, which I know currently is not visible. And during that time, too, over 15 years, I had the opportunity to give about 100 civil rights trainings, many of which addressed and dealt with language access issues. And before that, before I went to DOJ, I had the opportunity to have a fellowship, and then I was an attorney at the Empire Justice Center in Rochester, New York, where I had the opportunity to focus on language access issues for persons who spoke or read languages other than English, but also clients who are deaf or hard of hearing because of the large deaf and hard of hearing community that is in the Rochester area. And September 30th, 2025 was my last day officially working as a DOJ employee. And now I currently, as you can tell from today, I provide civil rights consulting and language access consulting and training to both public and private entities and organizations. So that's me talking about myself for 2 minutes, but let's get into the conversation, Liz.
It's really good just to get a history of where you've been and what you've seen and what you've been working on. And by the way, the lep.gov is one of my top resources. It's very sad to see that it's not available at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to get that back. But before we begin, this is to the audience. We want to make sure that you know that we want to encourage you to engage actively with us. Submit your questions, share your reactions in the chat, and help make this a dialogue. With that said, Mike, thank you for being here. Let's jump in. So our first question today is, what impact did Executive Order 14224 have on language access? And just to clarify, that is the executive order that made English the national language. So go ahead, Mike. Tell us your experience
Sure.
there.
And this is such an easy one too. It's a great way to start, is with an easy question. This order, which I think was effective and formally signed, I think March 5th of this year, what you need to know about it, and I want to be really clear about this, based on my experience at DOJ, I don't speak for the Department of Justice. I don't work at the federal government. But for me, I read this order, and a lot of people know that in July, the Department of Justice issued a guidance document that was based on this order as well. I read both of these, and the guidance document was to federal agencies. Neither the order nor the memo changed Title VI or its regulations, Supreme Court or other federal court decisions, or briefs, and I've highlighted this recently a lot, or briefs that DOJ has filed in federal lawsuits, all of which consistently explain that national origin discrimination can include failing to provide meaningful access to people who communicate in languages other than English. So orders can be issued, memos can be issued, but they don't have the power or authority to change statutes or federal decisions or even positions that DOJ has taken in lawsuits that have been filed. The order and the memo only provide information to federal agencies. That's the audience. Neither has the legal authority to change Title VI or other non-discrimination laws, or how the Supreme Court and federal courts have defined national origin discrimination. I think there's a lot of confusion because of the way the memo particularly was written, that somehow it was changing the law. And it doesn't have the authority to do that. What we are seeing in the order and the memo is a change. But this happens whenever there's a change of administration. In the three or maybe 4 administrations I've been part of, there are always new enforcement priorities. And this order and DOJ memo indicate that language access is less of a priority. This will likely lead to a decrease in administrative enforcement actions by federal civil rights offices and an increase in efforts by those federal agencies to discourage recipients of federal funds from providing language services. But that does not change, like I said, Title VI or the rights of people to bring Title VI lawsuits alleging intentional national origin discrimination. It doesn't change the civil rights obligations of entities receiving federal funds, and it certainly doesn't change or impact how state or local language access laws are created or enforced.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that is such an important thing to remember because as you mentioned, there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of fear, a lot of people that aren't really sure what this means for us, how it impacts interpreters, how it impacts translators, how it impacts the communities that they support. And I think that it is really important to get back there to the real root of the meaning. And, also, as we've discussed before, it does, as you mentioned, impact the way that those Title VI is going to be enforced, not Title VI, sorry, but the way that providing language services will be enforced. There's, the oversight is what we're going to be missing. And I think that's an important point to make because as we've discussed on previous roundtables, hospitals are still required to provide patient services. They're still required to ensure positive outcomes. They still have to report on those things. And what better way for them to get positive outcomes than providing communication access, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. Same thing with education. So, I think that's really important to put out there. Mike, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I could talk about this topic for 7
I know,
hours.
right?
But, no, I think that's right, and I think that's fair, and I think there are independent reasons why it makes sense to provide services, right? There's professional obligations, there's requirements because you're certified by certain certifying agencies or licensing agencies. There are state or local laws that mandate it. So those are all independent of, but no one's going to file a Title VI complaint and no one's going to enforce that. There's a lot of good customer service, public service, and also how can you do your job, right? How as a medical professional can I do my job if I can't speak to the person about their symptoms?
Absolutely.
How can I do a job as a police officer to ensure my safety if I can't talk to anyone at the scene of the crime? Yeah. Right? It's not possible to do your job and get the information you need to do your job. But yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So in the comment section, I see from Catherine that there has also been confusion expressed by the government and discussed in how what this actually looks like, what it actually means. Do you know, is there any kind of, I know you're not with the DOJ anymore, but is there any kind of ongoing training and communication going out to clarify these things?
Well, I think the DOJ memo is the thing I've seen and I've read, and in that memo it discusses several guidance documents that were to be issued to federal agencies. Those have not come out yet, and the timing of those is not kind of at the right timing. But the goal, from what I read from the memo, is to provide additional guidance to federal agencies. But I want to distinguish here. The executive order is meant to tell federal agencies what to do. An executive order cannot tell what programs receiving federal funds. That's not the authority. The authority is executive agencies, federal agencies. Just like the memo, I know it suggests it's talking about the rights and what recipients need to do, but that's not what the order allows. An executive order does not allow you to tell covered entities or entities that are supposed to comply with federal laws what they should be doing. If you want to tell entities what they should be doing, you have to issue a regulation with notice and comment and follow the Administrative Procedure Act. You can't do it by sending out a guidance memo. That's unlawful. You're not allowed to put a memo, and that changes all the rights of everyone. You have to do it with notice and comment and a regulation, a proposed regulation, or some other vehicle that allows public input. So one of the things outlined in the memo is there will be a guidance that will be developed and it will be put out for notice and comment. So people will have the opportunity to review that and add comments to it. But I just want to make sure to clarify that the order does not allow even DOJ to say, we're changing all the rules. An executive order and the memo does not allow that. If you want to change the rules, you got to issue regulations or remove regulations following the Administrative Procedure Act. And people on this call, I'm sure, have had the opportunity to do public comment, in the notice and comment period on different regulations.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. People in the comment section, I do see the things that you've mentioned. We are going to talk about 1557 and the Affordable Care Act a little bit later. But we're going to jump on to our next question. You've spent years working on language access from all different realms. When you look at the landscape today, where do you see the biggest gap between policy and practice?
Yeah, policy, there is a gap. And based on the work I've done, both, I've had the opportunity to do it at the state level and also at the federal level. I see a lot of organizations that incorrectly assume that because they wrote a language access policy or a plan, that alone will automatically change the practices in your organization, that it will automatically improve access to their programs for people who communicate in languages other than English in their service area, and it'll automatically demonstrate they're compliant. If you do not implement that plan or policy by training staff who interact with the public, that policy or plan will be hollow. It will just be a written document. You need to train staff who interact with the public on how to identify and assess the language needs. Not just provide, but how are you going to identify the specific language or dialect in the first place? You need to make sure that you're periodically checking on how staff actually provide these services. And a lot of organizations don't dedicate sufficient resources to actually implement the policy or plan. It is not just writing a document and here we're done. When you know the language communities in your service area, but you're not proactively reaching out to them or providing them with notice that you provide language services at no cost, you really can't say that you're providing meaningful access. That paper, policy, or plan, or maybe it's a PDF, that's fine too. If no one sees it and staff don't know how to implement it, you're really missing the connection between your commitment and the community that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And we sometimes see that with some of the entities that we're supporting. We move through the process of setting up the account and explaining services and having everything ready to go, but we never get a connection. And they say, well, maybe we don't really need it. And it says, well, does everyone know that you have it though? Do they know how to access it? This is a really important part of a language access plan is everyone trained? And, that's something also that we hear from hospital systems is that's the hardest part is making sure that their teams know how to access the services, know where to go, who their contact person is if they need to make a request or if they have questions. So I definitely agree with you that the training is such a huge component that's often overlooked.
And I don't mean a one-off training either. I mean that it's part of all onboarding for new staff, right? It's part of the mandatory refresher trainings that are done. It turns into part of the standard operating procedure, not the, oh yeah, we did that one time 5 years ago. I don't know if there's an updated version of the plan.
Yes.
I don't know what it says now. That's very different from a proactive commitment with resources behind it. I mean, that's a very different commitment to me. In the chat too, sorry, I was trying to read along too. Ben from National NILC, Ben's resource is one of the ones we'll have on a resource slide at the end. So just
perfect. Awesome. Yeah. By the way, guys, we're going to be sharing a bunch of resources provided by Mike. They're recommended by him at the end of this call. So get your cameras, your screens ready, take a picture of it, so that you have that information for the future. And thank you, Ben, for sharing your the resource in the chat as well. Thank you for calling attention to that too, Mike.
Trying to pay attention.
There's a lot going on. So I think we'll go ahead and move to the next question. Many organizations think that they're compliant. They have interpreters, they have translated forms. Maybe they even have a language access plan, but something still gets lost. In your experience, what's the biggest misconception about what language access actually means?
Yeah, and this is a really good question, and a little bit related to what we were just talking about.
Yes.
Rather than, I'll put this a different way, rather than kind of checking boxes on a list, an organization demonstrates compliance by conducting, in the first place, an honest self-assessment that is based on things like, what are the key programs we provide? How do we currently interact with people who communicate in languages other than English? Do we have current policies and procedures? The goal is to ensure ongoing compliance. And to do that, you conduct periodic reassessments of your language access program. Again, it's not this one of, I know when people think of legal compliance, they think of, well, but we check that box and we're done, right? We can just move on. Right. In that moment in time, that's where you were. Your language communities have changed. Maybe there's an influx of a certain refugee community. That's going to change, right? That's going to change the types of services you're going to need, the language communities you're serving. So are you reassessing periodically? Or, and I've had this happen in the investigations I've done, the plan was 10 years old, no one knew it existed, and they could barely find it. That's not really, demonstrating compliance. That's, well, we checked that box 10 years ago. We haven't really looked at it again since. So kind of like, in that moment, yes, but is it current? Is it being reassessed? So so that means for me, an organization with a language access plan, with interpreter contracts and translated documents may still not be providing access. And kind of what I was just saying, if the organization writes the plan but doesn't create, and I've seen this a bunch of times, they write the plan, but there are no policies or procedures for staff to use to implement the plan. The plan's great, but what does this mean for me? I'm a frontline person. I take calls and I see people in person every day. That plan doesn't help me figure out what I need to do in the moment. Or like I said, the plan's never been updated. Or, and this is even more important, both the staff and the public don't know the plan even exists or what it says. I've seen plans that were so buried, an organization said, oh yeah, it's on our website. And then I would ask, because this is part of the investigation, this is what I would always do. I would ask a frontline staff person, where's the plan? Oh, I don't know where that is. Well, if it's on the website and the staff doesn't even know it, how could someone from that community, aside from the fact that the plan was only written in English, how could they find out where that was, right? And then if you saw a document 12 years old, you wouldn't really think, oh, I can still use this. This is still valuable information.
Especially with technology. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Super outdated.
Yeah. And what happens is, if the staff don't have those policies and procedures, they don't know how to even access the interpreter. And in a lot of situations, I've heard from staff that managers discourage using the interpreter services because of resource concerns. Or staff tell people, because their managers tell them to do this, who speak other languages, bring someone else or bring a family member. Or don't you work with this community group? Can't they provide the interpreter? And all those things might be denying people access to programs and services. Yes, you have a written plan, but if practices are like those, you're not really providing the language access that you say you are. On the translation, I want to make sure to address the translation part of the question.
Please.
Translated documents and forms are only helpful if staff are trained on how to request them and access them. There is no value in putting money into translated forms that staff don't even know where they are, or that are never updated, right? Yeah, that's the version of the form, but it's not been updated because we had 5 updates on the English version of that form in the last 3 years. None of those are reflected on the current Spanish version of the form. And the forms need to be written in plain language, not Madrid Spanish professor Spanish, right?
Yes.
That's not your audience. You want to hit the most universal version, plain language version, also in the translation. It is of no value to waste your time at a professor level Spanish translating documents, which cost more money. It's not going to hit as many people. It's not as universal of access. So
yeah,
you first make a plain English version, and then you have that translated. And again, with translation, it's done by a competent translator rather than people who self-identify as bilingual or who feel pressure because they speak another language to do it for the organization. And this also means not relying solely on magic buttons or automatic AI translations, unless, not solely rely on them, unless you are going to have that competent translator also review that final product before it is the final product and put out to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of that so much. From the comment section, Marlene mentioned that, if folks don't ask for services, then that means that you're not accessible for them and they're not going to ask. So it's like this big circle. It's a cycle that keeps going because they don't see signage. They don't see that there are services available. And so they don't ask, especially for these communities who are unfortunately often used to not having access. That's something that, the deaf community has suffered for a long time and fought for a long time. And they're still fighting for access for children in school and for themselves when they go to the doctor's office or to, a meeting with a teacher, or, you name the situation and they're fighting. It's definitely something where if you don't know that it's available to you, are you even going to ask for it? Especially in today's time.
And to play into that too, Liz, if part of how you're implementing your plan does not include this proactive engagement in language to those language communities, there is no way that information is going to come across. You could have the most beautiful website, and at the top it says, we provide free language services. That's only provided in English. There's no other outreach. There's no other connections to those language communities. It's not going to happen. I remember, I worked in Rochester. It was a very large, capital D deaf community there. And there were many instances, even there, where there's a large deaf community where people did not understand. It's not just for me, it's also for my companion, right?
Absolutely.
So that's also a thing too. Scope. Who's protected by this? Who can get an interpreter, right? Not just saying we provide interpreters, but how can I ask for it is also translated or that's communicated. It's really no value. And I've seen a lot of these posters that say, we provide interpreter services. And if you read the rest of the document or the poster, it doesn't explain all the time, who should I contact for that? Mm-hmm. How do I get it? How is that arranged? And when you ask staff and they don't know, that's one of those disconnects that you were talking about earlier.
Yep. They're just checking off the box. Good to go. We're good for another 10 years, Mike. Yeah. And unfortunately, that is too common.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned AI a little bit before, and we've got a comment from Belinda about AI and the use of language access in the language access field. So without federal guidance on usage of AI for language access, are there resources or an authoritative voice on use cases evaluating quality and anti-bias or responsible use?
Yeah, and Belinda raises a really good point with her question, which in the absence of, and I can only speak to what I know from the Department of Justice and the federal agencies that I know really well. I don't believe that there is a general AI guidance, and I know that there's not a specific AI guidance for use for either oral or written communication.
Yeah.
I do know that there are, and I know this was done last. This report was actually, issued from the Safe AI group, where they analyzed and looked at AI in the context of language services and its delivery. But in the absence of any kind of federal standard or guidance, it is really hard. AI and automatic translation has been an issue for a very long time. I think the first thing I ever wrote about automatic translation was actually from like 2010, so like 15 years ago.
Wow.
But I still hold to some of the things I said then, which is, when you're looking at AI or one of these tools, I always ask the provider or company, how did you assess the quality of this? Did you involve linguists, right? Was either an interpreter or translator used during the creation of this product or to check the quality of this product? That's one of the first things I ask. And I get concerned when the answer is no, because they're saying it's a certain accuracy, but I've had no one who actually is skilled and competent to check that accuracy, verifying that. And then the second thing I ask is, if someone's going to be using this product or service, can they have a test run, right? I don't want to just commit to buying this product before I actually get to test it in the real world setting. Like, let's use law enforcement. I don't want to just say, oh, here's a new app on your phone, and we're in commitment wise for these resources if I don't know if it's going to work in the field. Let us use it for 3 months and try it out in real world situations and see. So if you're sure of the quality of delivery of either the written or the spoken, say it does the automatic kind of voice output, automatically understands the language, does the voice output. I want to see that. Entities should be asking, I want to see that play out in a trial period before I commit to this long term. And then the third part for me is ask staff who have used that product, those frontline staff that are such a priority when you're talking about this, did it really do the things you needed it to do in the real world setting? Then and only then would I be open to yes. What I find, though, is that sometimes people kind of do a shortcut version and say, oh, that looks shiny and cool. Let's just sign up for it. I think this will work, right?
Absolutely.
And so I know there's not a lot of federal guidance, but I feel like there are practical things. I know linguists know this. I know it's so obvious to them, but they're not always part of that procurement or contract conversation. But who really suffers is the frontline staff, because they're told, oh, we don't call in-person or video interpreters anymore because we have this tool. But the tool doesn't work, and no one asked them whether they could do a trial or did it work or what's the feedback on it. So you get kind of stuck with this thing, and then we can't reach out anymore to in-person. No, this is the thing we're using now. And it does a real disservice. I mean, like I said, not only to the community who feels isolated now because they also know it doesn't work, but also to that frontline staff who don't know how they can do their job. So I think there's a big connect when there's no quality check, when we don't ask the hard questions, which are not hard questions. They're reasonable questions to ask a supplier or a provider. How did you make sure this actually works at that quality? Can we trial run it in a real world setting? And ask staff and probably even language communities, did this actually work? Like, yeah, it works great for Spanish, but we have individuals from Somalia, and for my mind, it doesn't actually work that well at all. You need to know that.
Absolutely. And there's so many tools that are popping up left and right. AI this, AI that, AI for everything. And it is a lot to comb through. And there are a lot of claims made. So a trial period makes perfect sense. And if your AI program, whatever it does, if it actually works, you shouldn't be afraid of that.
Oh, and the other thing is, so Emily, she put the link to the Safe AI task force. Sorry, that's the one I was talking about in the comments there.
Oh, perfect.
Emily. Anyway, that's my take. That's not an official government policy. I don't work for the federal government anymore. But over time, I really found that some of this, and it's kind of like a lot of language access stuff I'm talking about, you have to think of the practical pieces. You have to think of the practical things. And you have to have comfort asking these questions. Do not assume all this has been vetted. Now, if they show you the studies that demonstrate that the such and such score of accuracy is this and that, realize 80% accuracy or whatever it is still means 1 out of every 5 words is not correct. That is you and your face to the public missing 1 of every 5 words either spoken or written to the public. If you had a speaker and every fifth word you didn't understand, I don't think you would think you're doing a very good job customer service or public service wise.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just
Well,
from a practical level.
that could lead to bad outcomes for the community. It could lead to dangerous situations,
Yeah.
depending on what you're talking about. So yeah, it's definitely something that it's it's still, even though you said 15 years ago you know wrote about it and worked with it, it's still very young, and it definitely is not ready for high stakes situations.
And Joanne, I just want to point out, Joanne too put
Please.
another resource for them. This is mostly for the court and justice side of things, but the National Center for State Courts did put out considerations and cautions for machine translation, which is a more recent paper on the topic as
Perfect.
well.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get us off track.
No, it's great. It's great. And, engaging with the audience, that's why we're here. So it's excellent. Okay, so it looks like we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. When language access breaks down, it's not just an inconvenience. It can completely change someone's life. Can you share a real moment or case that reminds you why this work matters so deeply?
I mean, it's a lot of examples I have.
I'm sure.
I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of incredible advocates and people. And I do want to address this because I think sometimes people underestimate the courage you have to kind of file a complaint and to kind of relive a really tough experience you had. That's a lot to put on someone. But when I was working at DOJ, realized if I didn't receive a complaint from someone that had that courage to file it, I wouldn't have a thing to look at. I wouldn't have a thing to do.
Yeah.
But just to give a DOJ example and kind of a court example, I worked a lot on state court language access issues. I did receive a complaint alleging that, and I'm going to anonymize the details here, but a complaint alleging that a family court repeatedly denied requests for an interpreter by someone who spoke a language other than English. And this was during COVID. And this specific individual actually had to drive from one state to another over several hours for these hearings. And the interpreter was needed for a child custody hearing for their child. So pretty serious, right?
Wow, yeah.
Child custody. The complaint alleged that when the person had an attorney, that attorney filed a motion for an interpreter, which is kind of the formal way you can do it in a lot of court settings. The court denied that request. And then they alleged that when the individual no longer had an attorney, the individual again requested an interpreter, and it was again denied by the court. And the individual was told by court staff that because they previously had the resources to pay for and have a private attorney, the court should not have to provide them or pay for an interpreter for them for that court proceeding.
Wow.
Now, going back to that, if someone had not filed that complaint, right, with the office I was working in, the Civil Rights Division, and there's a lot of ifs here. And if DOJ had not opened an investigation and contacted the court about those allegations, I don't think that person would have been able to participate at these important court hearings about the custody of their own child. Right? That's one example. My concern always was we were doing incredible work. We got to do incredible things in a lot of places, but who didn't file a complaint, right?
Yeah.
Who didn't, to our point earlier, who didn't know the process to do that, right? Who didn't know that they could do that because maybe we weren't doing a good job communicating that to other communities, language communities, right? So that's always the concern. So when you have the opportunity, we tried to do as much as we could with the complaint that we had, but it's a lot of courage.
Yeah.
But it's really critical moments like that, like your relationship with your child, and you have no idea what's going on in the hearing. So that's an example I can think of. I mean, I have a lot of deaf, hard of hearing examples too from when I worked at the Empire Justice Center, but that's one of the examples I think of.
Talk about life-changing. I can't even imagine. And that's just one example that you've had over your entire career. I mean, there's so many out there. Actually right now in Florida, there's a student that's being denied services in the school system that they're in. He's 6 years old, just a little kid. All of this is public knowledge. I'm not, divulging anything private, but so there's a huge battle going on down there trying to get this student the services and, the access that he needs to be successful in school. So there's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done on all fronts. Okay, so let's move on. That is just such an heartbreaking example. And the fact that you presented, or like your perspective is the bravery needed for something like that. That is so real, and maybe not a perspective that everyone would look at. The strength and bravery that's required to file a complaint in a situation like that. Like, there's so much at stake. And I think the biggest fear is going to be retaliation of some kind. No idea how that would happen, but the fact that it could happen is absolutely can be
and it has happened. I mean, one of the court examples I worked on, again, no details, but he was an individual who was an interpreter themselves, and they filed the complaint because not only did they think the policies were incorrect and they were denying access to persons who were, spoke or read languages other than English, but they themselves were then blacklisted because the entity they filed the complaint against found out.
Wow.
And so part of our resolution for that particular individual was remuneration for them because of that, because of that alleged retaliation.
That kind of, it makes me think about the cuts that we've seen to the government, to various agencies, to all the agencies pretty much. And it seems like you had a completely full-time job doing that, but you had a whole team of people working with you. Has that been impacted?
Well, I mean, honestly, on the team I used to work with in the Civil Rights Division, there's two teams I got to work with. I was lucky to work with. At the Office for Civil Rights, to my understanding, it wasn't as severe at OJP, Office of Justice Programs. But in the Civil Rights Division, and this has been widely reported, even the New York Times, I think there's been an 80 to 85% reduction in staff that either left or were asked to leave or felt pressure to leave. So the office I used to work with, the Federal Coordination and Compliance Section, for all effective purposes, doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't exist. So there is a huge impact that's happened. Those people were thoroughly committed to helping every single person they could, every single day, tirelessly. Incredible attorneys that are my friends, that are so knowledgeable and so committed to making sure our civil rights laws are enforced. That was their only mission. That was their only drive. We were civil service attorneys. There was no political ambition behind any of it. And that kind of commitment is going to be hard to replace. That's what I can say about that.
Wow. Well, and now there's no team of people out there doing that. So there's a lot. I mean, this is obviously just me assuming, right? But that means that there's a lot of complaints maybe that aren't being addressed.
Yeah, I don't know the current state, but there was definitely a steady stream of complaints. That's what I can.
Wow, and without a team to back it up.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really heavy to think about.
I will tell you that, and then with the shutdown to add to that for the people that are actually still working there, it's just further insult to a really tough situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So many different fronts it's impacting.
Yeah.
It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about.
I just wanted to throw out here, I've seen several comments, people asking if this is going to be recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. It is being recorded. It will be on LinkedIn, available as well as on our YouTube channel. We'll post it there, and it's on our website. So we definitely have the ability. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the link for it. Or you can just head over to the Effectiff LinkedIn page and find it there. Okay, well, that was really heavy. I just have a lot of things that I'm like this is this and this and this. And it just is like on top of everything else, it's a lot. Okay. we're going to move on to the next question, guys. Okay, so you've worked at the intersection of law, culture, and community for a long time. What do you think the systems often miss when they approach language access as a legal requirement or an extra service that takes resources rather than provides human rights?
Yeah. This is going to be a common theme for me, but when you're viewing language access as only a legal requirement, it turns into a binary kind of yes or no answer to the question, like the checkbox, whether you're compliant or not. But it's a box that a lot of people think you can just check off on a form because you wrote the plan or policy, like I keep saying.
Yeah.
But a yes or no approach is not a sincere commitment that demonstrates your goal is ongoing compliance and protecting the rights of each person, that each person has to be free from discrimination based on their national origin. So how do you kind of and get you away from the yes or no? How do you demonstrate an ongoing commitment? You do that by incrementally implementing a plan over time with policies and procedures. A lot of times people will write the thing and they say, oh, and it's going to happen tomorrow. That's not realistic. A lot of people just assume, well, I wrote the thing and it's going to magically happen.
Right.
You incrementally do it. It takes time to actually do it the right way.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this already, improving access to services for language communities and holding staff accountable when they don't follow. There's lots of places that say, this is the procedure, but how many staff are actually held accountable for not following the right procedures? In-house, right?
Yes, absolutely.
This is another point, I've said it a little bit differently earlier, weaving language access into the overall customer service approach of the organization. It is not a freestanding add-on, extra, special, let's make people feel bad for asking for this. It is part of this is part of our comprehensive, positive customer service approach. That's very different. Lastly, proactively soliciting language communities for their feedback about how you're doing, but the other part of this, and compensating them for their time.
Ooh.
If you want someone's honest opinion and you are taking their time and you need their perspective because you can't duplicate that perspective, and you can't, they're the ones that are getting the service in language. It is not free to be a community-based organization, right? That time is not free. It is constantly a problem to assume just because you care about that community, all your time is free. That's never the case.
Right.
That's never the case.
Absolutely.
So, in my experience, if you view language access as an extra cost rather than a right other people have, you often won't advertise language services like we talked about. And you won't advertise in other languages. And when few people use those services, you'll justify cutting off or reducing those services for lack of use. That cycle you were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Which only harms the language communities who need your vital programs and services. That's the only result that happens. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that cycle that happens sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man. When we were talking specifically with this question, you were talking about how language services need to be woven into customer service, right? They need to be a part of that big picture of the experience that the person has with you. We have a lot of hospital clients, and that's a conversation that we have with them. Like, hey, do you have language service questions in your patient surveys? Because that's a really great way to get feedback about how your patients feel. Did they get services when they needed them?
Yeah.
Were they in a bed for 3 days before anyone even knew that they needed a Swahili interpreter? Obviously, I just made that up. Okay. But my point is, the hospitals that say, yes, we do, we have that written in there. It's a part of our overall patient experience plan to make sure that language access is a priority. Those are the ones that are, they're able to provide a whole picture and they're able to make those improvements. Whereas when you have, no, we don't have anything like that. We just, if they ask for it, we do what we can, right? It's a big difference between this is a priority and this is a suggestion.
And
right?
related, that kind of feedback is also helpful for the individual interpreter or translator as well.
Absolutely.
Every linguist wants to know that they're doing a good job and to get feedback on how they're doing. Very rarely do I see organizations not only take the feedback, but say they have a privately outside contracted interpreter translator, that they then share that feedback. They
Yes.
should know if the interpreter they're paying for time and time again is of poor quality. That is a waste of, look, we're talking about resources. That is a waste of resources.
Yes.
And because
absolutely.
you don't have the feedback from the person that needed the interpreter or translator, you don't know if you keep paying for someone at X dollars an hour, if they're actually good.
Yeah.
Like, what if you're constantly having this local person that you think is maybe they self-identify as bilingual even, right? And you've never asked how good a quality, you might just be wasting everyone's time and your own money. So I actually, if you want to talk about from resources, it's also a great waste of resources because
That's
you have
such
no
a
way
good
to
point.
quality check. Is that
Yep.
your best investment with your resources, which are limited? I mean, there's very few organizations that say, oh, cost is never an issue with this topic.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
opposite, right? So
Never heard that one.
never heard that one before. But what are you doing to make sure that the one that you have and that you're using is giving the best quality? Well, we don't do that
Yeah.
feedback form thing, and we never check it if we do. It's
Yes.
very hard for you
Yeah.
to know that.
Yeah. And you know what? Especially big business, hospital systems, education, they all thrive on data. They want that data. And what better way than to put it all together, and it's all part of the experience. So it seems like it's a no-brainer, but
But
it's
yet I go into organizations that would investigate, and no such version of such feedback form. And if it did exist, it's certainly, this is the other kicker, it was only in English, the form itself.
oh my gosh.
And so it's just really hard to understand.
Yes.
Like, I'm clearly the person that, maybe I read in English. Maybe you check both my written and spoken language needs, and I read in English, but doubt it, right? And then
Yeah.
and then I can't fill this out. So like, oh well, if a form's not filled out completely, you can't use it, right? Done.
Yep.
Again.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is like, what are we doing, guys? Come on. Come on.
Yeah.
Definitely can be a little frustrating.
It can.
But so we just have we have another comment for from Khalil. Vivian Nudick, PhD, encourage the community to make noise, show up, demand services, hold the institutions accountable. We often resolve grievances with the community, and we encourage those people to go advocate in and from their community. I think this is so important. And this is also a conversation that we've had on our roundtables before. Are you communicating with the community?
Yeah.
Are you reaching out to them in their language, or are you putting things on, posting online? Oh, we are very active on social media. Okay, in English, but what about the other languages that you support? I mean, you have patients or families from all walks of life. Like, we need to be able to communicate with them on their
Yeah.
and yes, in their preferred language.
Well, I always ask the, which is a lot of times hard to answer for the entity. I ask what their non-Spanish communication looks like. Look, I love Spanish. It's a beautiful language. It's very important to me, right? But I also know it's the language after English in almost every single county in the entire country.
Yes.
But what about those other language communities? What do you have for outreach?
Yeah.
We don't really have a channel beyond our Spanish channel in all of our social media, or in any social media, or in any other platform. You're missing whole sections of the community. And
right. Right. You got to get the word out there. If you're going to provide these services, like let's do it. Let's put the information in the community's hands so that they know that they can come here. That's something too. I talk about a lot with the deaf community, right? If they know someone they know went to a hospital and got an interpreter in person for their emergency visit, they're going to tell their friends, hey, I don't know if you've ever been here, but I went here and I had an interpreter and they were phenomenal. And I understood everything that was going on. And the doctor understood what was wrong with me. And I got, moved through my diagnosis or whatever the experience is. They're going to tell the community, and then they're going to start showing up. So, it's something that is largely overlooked is that power of this is the community that we're not contacting, we're not reaching out to, we're not communicating with them.
The reverse is also true, though, and it has a chilling effect, right? So I heard,
Absolutely.
and the person told me at the front desk that they don't provide and they don't have to, and I'll need to bring someone. That word also gets out very quickly to the community. And a service or program that everyone would otherwise be entitled to, they are wholly rejected from, simply because word got out that they don't provide language services. That is more often the case that I hear. And then if there's nothing to do to remedy that by the agency or organization because they don't have any proactive outreach, it's self-fulfilling, like I said, and it just justifies why they shut down those services. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well, nobody was using it, so we obviously didn't need it. Well, no, that's not exactly how this works. Okay, so we still have several questions and we only have 5 minutes left.
Sorry.
No, don't be. It's been an amazing conversation. I just want to make sure that if there's anybody in the audience that wanted to, ask any questions, or I know we do have a lot of comments there as well, and we will review all of those. But if there's anything that, anybody wants to ask us right now, I'm gonna stop with the questions because we don't have time. So such a good conversation though. We only got through half.
Sorry, Liz.
Don't be.
People
please.
know I'm a talker, especially on this.
That's why we're here.
That's what happens.
It's been such a great conversation. And let's see. Just a lot of echoing, the things that we've mentioned, the things that have been mentioned in the chat. A lot of really good information out there. And like I said, guys, at the end, we are going to post a screen of resources recommended just to keep you informed with what's going on. Great places to look up your information, great, there's some great information there. So go ahead and you can take a screenshot of that so that you can refer back to it and check out some good materials there.
Oh, and I should note too, for some of the Department of Justice ones, because lep.gov is down, they are archive links. So there's a service that archives older websites, and so it's an archive link. It'll work. It just might take a couple seconds, but it'll get you to the resource.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, if you could leave today's audience with one message about language and justice, what would it be?
It's not hard at all. I think of something that was said. I'm an attorney, by trade, by training, and the Supreme Court said something 100 years ago. It said, and this has been quoted a lot of times, but I want to say it again. Quote, "The protection of the Constitution extends to all, to those who speak other languages, as well as those born with English on their tongue." For me, federal laws like Title VI and non-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Care Act are based on these constitutional protections, and they cannot be changed by an executive order or a memo. So the question really is, how can you keep that fundamental promise that all people will be treated equally if you're denying someone access to your programs and services solely because of their national origin and the language they read or speak?
Couldn't have said it better. Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Well, I think we're going to leave you guys with that today. Thank you again so much for joining us. It has been an excellent time. And I think we'll put up those resources one more time for you in case you didn't get a chance to screenshot it. Thank you again, and we will see you at the next roundtable in November. Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Mike, and interpreters.
Thank you, interpreters.